Chicago. 5:15 in the morning. A man pushes a cleaning cart through the marble lobby of a 42-floor glass tower. Alone. Before the coffee is brewed. Before a single executive has walked through the door. He has been awake since 3. He has a sister in a hospital bed across the city. A prescription he cannot yet afford. 2 jobs and a body running on 4 hours of sleep and something quieter than hope. He mops the floor. He does not know that in 7 days he will be lying in a hospital bed himself. A needle in his arm. Giving the only thing he has left to give. To a stranger. To someone who looked at him like he was invisible. He does not know her name yet. She does not know his. But somewhere across this city, a woman in a perfect suit is about to walk through that same door. And nothing after that morning will be the same. Damon Wren woke up at 3:47 in the morning. Not because of an alarm. Not because of a noise. Just because his body had forgotten how to sleep past 4, the way some people forget how to sit still, or how to eat without checking the time first. He lay there for exactly 90 seconds. Ceiling. Dark. The sound of the radiator doing what old radiators do in Chicago November. Knocking like it had something to say and no one to say it to. Then he got up. That was the whole decision. No drama. No internal debate. Just the blanket folded back and both feet on the cold floor and the day beginning the way it always began. Quietly. Without ceremony. Without anyone watching. The apartment was small in the way that stops feeling small after a while. 1 bedroom for Nadia. A pull-out couch for Damon, though he rarely pulled it out fully anymore. A kitchen where the refrigerator hummed a note slightly off from the radiator, and together they made something that wasn't quite music, but wasn't quite not. He moved through the dark without turning on a light. Knew every inch. The exact position of the chair leg he'd bumped exactly once 2 years ago, and never bumped again. The spot near the bathroom door where the floor creaked if you stepped left instead of right. He stepped right, every single morning. Coffee first. Then Nadia's medication sorted into the weekly container she called her rainbow box because she'd decorated it with stickers when she bought it. Little suns and moons in yellow and blue, and Damon had never once mentioned that it was a little kid's sticker set, because she was 22 and she could decorate whatever she wanted, however she wanted. And because she'd bought it on the same day as her 2nd round of chemo, and she'd been smiling when she brought it home. And that smile was not something Damon was going to say a single word against. He checked her results folder on his phone while the coffee brewed. Lymphoma panel. CBC. The last blood draw from Thursday. He read the numbers the way he used to read load calculations back at Kellerman Industrial. Methodical. Looking for deviation. Looking for the thing that didn't fit. His face didn't change when he read. Not because he wasn't feeling anything. Because feeling something and showing it were 2 different choices. And he had made his choice 3 years ago, standing in a hospital hallway when the doctor used the word lymphoma for the first time. And Nadia's hand found his arm and squeezed, and he had looked at her face and understood that his job, from that moment forward, was to be the one who didn't fall apart. So he didn't. He made coffee, he packed his bag. He pulled on his uniform in the dark, and he looked at himself in the small mirror by the door for exactly 2 seconds before turning away. Dark green. His name embroidered on the chest in thread that had started to fray slightly at the D. He'd been meaning to fix it. He added it to the list of things he was meaning to do, and closed the door softly behind him. Chicago at 4:30 in the morning is a different city than Chicago at noon. Quieter, colder, honest in a way that daylight hides. The L train rattled through the dark overhead and Damon walked beneath it with his collar up, breath fogging, counting blocks the way he always counted them. Not because he needed to, because rhythm helps. Because when you're running on 4 hours of sleep, and your body aches in the specific way that comes from years of physical work stacked on top of each other like sediment, you need something to hold on to, even if it's just counting. 1, 2, 3. Voss Capital Tower stood at the corner of Michigan and Wacker like it had always been there and always would be. 42 floors of glass and steel that caught the pre-dawn gray and gave nothing back. The lobby lights were already on inside, that particular gold warmth that costs more to maintain than Damon's monthly rent, and was specifically designed to make a certain kind of person feel certain things when they walked through the door. He wasn't that kind of person. He went through the service entrance on the side. By 5:15 he had his cart. By 5:22 he was moving through the main lobby with a mop and the specific efficiency of a man who has done this long enough that his hands know where to go before his mind has finished the thought. The marble floors were always clean. That was the point. That was his job. To make them look like they had never been anything other than perfect. He worked. No music, no podcasts. Just the sound of the mop and the hum of the building waking up around him. And somewhere deep in the building's HVAC system, a vibration at around 40 Hz, that Damon had identified in his first week as a misaligned bearing in the secondary air handler on the 14th floor. He'd mentioned it to the building supervisor. The supervisor had nodded and done nothing. The bearing was still there, still vibrating. Damon still noticed it every single morning. Some things you can fix, some things you report and then watch not get fixed. And you learn which is which, and you keep moving. By 6:30, the first wave of early arrivals started coming through the lobby. Junior associates in suits that were slightly too new, an eyed guy in headphones who never looked up, a woman from accounting who always nodded, at Damon, a small nod, the kind that acknowledges another human being without requiring either party to stop walking. He nodded back. He appreciated that nod more than she probably knew. By 7, the lobby was filling. By 7:15, the energy shifted. It was subtle at first. A change in posture among the people near the elevator bank. Conversations lowering or stopping entirely. The way a room recalibrates when it senses something incoming. Then Zara Voss walked through the door. She was 34 years old, and she moved like the building had been designed with her in mind. Bodycon dress in a deep wine red that ended just above the knee. Silk-pressed hair falling straight and smooth to her collarbone. Heels that hit the marble floor with a sound that was neither loud nor quiet, but simply precise, like a metronome set to a tempo that everyone else was now expected to match. She was the kind of beautiful that stops being about aesthetics after a while and becomes something else. Something that makes rooms adjust. The kind that isn't accidental and isn't arrogant. Just present. Fully. Completely present in a way that most people spend their entire lives trying to approximate. 2 assistants flanked her, both holding things, both moving at her speed without being told to. She was already on a call, left hand holding the phone to her ear, right hand accepting a tablet from the assistant on her right without looking. Her eyes were scanning something in the middle distance, not the lobby, not the people in it, something internal. Something that had been occupying her since, before she walked through the door. Damon was at the far end of the elevator bank. His cart was positioned near the executive elevator, not blocking it. 3 feet to the left of the door, angled toward the wall the way he always positioned it when he was finishing the floor near the elevator columns. The way he had positioned it every Tuesday and Thursday morning for 11 months. She saw it before she saw him. Her pace didn't slow. Her call didn't pause, but her eyes landed on the cart, and something in her expression shifted, just slightly, and she lowered the phone for exactly the length of time it took to say 4 sentences. Whose equipment is this? Not a question. The way someone speaks when they already know the answer doesn't matter. Facilities doesn't park carts in front of executive elevators. This is a client-facing lobby, not a storage corridor. A beat, move it. 22 people in the lobby. Not one of them said anything. Damon looked up from the mop. He looked at the cart, he looked at her, and something happened in his chest that he was familiar with and had gotten very good at not showing. Not anger. Not exactly. Something older than anger. More tired. The feeling of being looked through by someone begins who has decided they already know everything they need to know about you, based on the color of your uniform and where you're standing. He moved the cart, 3 feet to the right, away from the elevator. He inclined his head slightly. I apologize. It won't happen again. That was all. No more, no less. She was already back on the phone before the sentence finished. She stepped into the executive elevator. The doors closed. The lobby exhaled without realizing it had been holding its breath. Damon went back to mopping. The floor where her heels had crossed. He mopped it the same as the rest. Steady. Even strokes. He didn't think about it. He thought about Nadia's Thursday appointment. He thought about whether the pharmacy on Halstead would have her refill ready, or whether he'd have to call again. He thought about the bearing vibrating in the 14th floor air handler, and whether anyone would fix it before it failed completely. He finished the lobby by 8:15, moved to the stairwells, then the third floor corridor, then the maintenance hallway on 3, which is where he was at 8:52, when the radio on his cart crackled. Maintenance, we have a situation at elevator B on 3. Secondary car, doors not responding. 2 occupants inside. Damon stopped. He set the mop against the wall. Elevator B on 3 was auxiliary car, older mechanism, installed during the building's second renovation. He knew it. He knew it the way he knew every mechanical system in this building. Because when you spend enough years designing industrial systems, you don't stop seeing them just because you're no longer being paid to. You walk through a building and you feel its bones. You hear what's wrong before you see it. You know. He knew elevator B had been running with a degraded door clutch for 6 weeks. He had written it in the maintenance log. He had mentioned it to the supervisor. The supervisor had nodded. He was already moving. 3rd floor was 2 flights up. He took the stairs at a pace that his body logged as necessary, rather than urgent, which meant fast but controlled, the way you move when you've learned that running burns energy you might need later. He got to the corridor. He could hear it before he saw it. One voice, low and controlled, trying to stay that way, and one voice that wasn't. The second voice belonged to a woman who was not staying controlled. I need you to breathe, the first voice was saying. We're going to be fine, they're coming. I can't be in here, I need to get out. Please, I need to get out. Damon stood at the elevator doors. He looked at the seam, the gap at the base, the position of the door panel. He put his hand flat against the metal and felt the mechanism inside. The clutch was engaged, but the sensor was reading wrong. Misfire, correctable. He went back to the maintenance hallway, came back with a 3/8 flathead and a pry bar. I'm going to open this door, he said to the doors. I need you both to step to the back of the car, away from the doors. Can you do that? A pause. Then the controlled voice, yes. We're back. Damon inserted flathead into the manual release slot at the top of the doorframe. Felt for the pin, found it, applied pressure at the exact angle the mechanism required, which he knew the way he knew his own hands. Slow, steady. The door released. He had it open in 4 minutes and 30 seconds, which was 11 minutes and 20 seconds before the building's contracted maintenance team arrived. He verified this by the timestamp on their radio call, which came through his unit just as the second woman, the one who hadn't been staying controlled, stepped through the gap in the door and sat down hard on the hallway floor and pressed both palms to her face. Her colleague put a hand on her shoulder, looked up at Damon. Thank you. Damon was already returning the pry bar. Elevator B needs a door clutch replaced, he said. It's in the log. He walked back to his mop. He picked it up. He continued the corridor. 40 minutes later, he was in the equipment room on the basement level, logging his hours into the tablet system, when his phone buzzed on the shelf beside him. Not Nadia's hospital. That was a different ringtone. A tone he had set specifically so his nervous system would know the difference before his brain caught up. This was Kellerman Freelance, a client with a pump system query. He answered it, talked through the specs, looked at nothing while he talked because that's how his brain worked best with technical problems. No visual input, just the data. Gave them 3 options and the cost differential between each. Told them he'd send the written breakdown by 8 that evening. Hung up. Sat for a moment. He had 4 hours before his next shift. Nadia had a follow-up call with her oncologist at 2. He needed to be there for that. He needed to stop at the pharmacy on Halstead. He needed to email the Kellerman breakdown tonight, which meant after 10, when Nadia was asleep and the apartment was quiet enough to think. He added it all to the list. The list existed in his head, not written anywhere. Just organized there in the way he organized everything, categorized by urgency and dependency, like a project flowchart that ran permanently in the background of his mind. It had been running since he was 19, and their mother had her first stroke, and someone had to become the person who managed things. He was that person. He had never not been that person. He locked the equipment room and went to his car and drove home to make lunch before Nadia woke up. Nadia was already awake. She was at the kitchen table in her yellow robe with a spiral notebook open in front of her and a pen moving across the page. She wrote the way she did most things, with her whole body paying attention. When she wrote, she leaned slightly forward, and her left foot tucked under her right knee, and she chewed the inside of her cheek without knowing she was doing it. She was 22 years old, and she had been writing poetry since she was 8, and she was good at it, in the way that some people are good at things they don't talk about, because the thing is too close to them to survive too much talking about. She looked up when he came in. "You're early. Slow morning." She looked at him the way she always looked at him when he said things like slow morning. Steady. Unconvinced. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I slept fine." "You have the eyes." "What eyes?" "The eyes you get when you slept for 4 hours and are going to tell me you slept fine." He put his keys on the hook, opened the refrigerator. "What do you want for lunch?" "I want you to sit down for 5 minutes. I'm making lunch, Damon." He stopped. She was looking at him from the table, pen down, notebook closed, the full attention that she only brought out when she meant business. It was a little terrifying. It had always been a little terrifying. Nadia at 8 had been this way. Nadia at 14, Nadia at 22, with lymphoma and a rainbow pill case and a yellow robe. "Sit down," she said. "Just for a minute." He sat down. She watched him for a moment, not saying anything, just watching. And then she reached across the table and put her hand over his. And that was all she did, just that. Her hand over his. Small, warm. The way she used to grab his hand when she was little, and they were crossing a street, and she was trusting him completely with no conditions attached. He looked at her hand, and then at the window, and then at the table. "I'm okay," he said. "I know," she said. "I just wanted you to sit down for a minute." They sat for a minute. Then he got up and made lunch. Turkey on wheat, the kind she could eat without her stomach fighting her. Cut the crusts the way she liked them without her asking. Poured water with lemon. Put it in front of her. She looked up at him. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm going to thank you." Stubborn. Obviously. She picked up her sandwich. "Tell me about your morning." So he told her about the lobby. Not the part about Zara. Just the elevator. The woman sitting on the hallway floor with her palms over her face. He told it simply, the way he told most things, without decoration. Just what happened and then what happened next. Nadia listened. When he finished, she said, "Did they at least say thank you?" One of them did. She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. And then, after a pause, "The other one will. Later. When she's had time to be less scared." Damon looked at her. "You don't know that. I know people." She took another bite. "Also, you fixed it in like 4 minutes. That's impressive, even if they were too panicked to notice." He almost smiled. "Almost. Eat your lunch," he said. She ate her lunch. He made himself a coffee he didn't really want and stood at the counter and looked at the window. November light, flat and pale. The kind that makes Chicago look like a photograph of itself from a long time ago. He thought about the bearing in the 14th floor air handler. He thought about the clutch on elevator B. He thought about the Kellerman pump specs. He did not think about Zara Voss or her heels or her voice, or the way 22 people had stood in that lobby and looked at the floor. He was very practiced at not thinking about things. At 1:45 he drove Nadia to Mercy General for her oncology call. Mercy General was 12 minutes from their apartment depending on lights. Damon knew every traffic pattern on the route. He knew the lights that ran long on red near the hospital entrance, and he planned for them the way he planned for everything. Added the margin to his estimate. Arrived at 1:43. 2 minutes to spare. Nadia signed in at the front desk. The woman there, Paulette, had been working that desk for 4 years and knew Nadia by name, and always had a yellow sticky note waiting with any updates to the floor directory, because Nadia had once mentioned that she liked knowing where things were, and Paulette had remembered. That kind of small grace. The kind that costs nothing and means everything when you're 22 and sick and spending a lot of time in buildings you'd rather not be in. They took the elevator to the 4th floor. Nadia's oncologist's office was in suite 412. They had been to suite 412 17 times in the last 9 months. Damon knew the pattern of the carpet in the waiting room. knew which chairs didn't wobble. They sat. Nadia opened her notebook. Damon checked his phone. 2 emails from Kellerman. A reminder about Nadia's Thursday blood draw. A text from the building supervisor at Voss Capital that said simply, "Good work on the 3rd floor situation today." He stared at that text for a moment. Not good work on the bearing I've been mentioning for 6 weeks. Not good work for being the person who actually knew how to open the door. Just good work. 3 words that acknowledged something happened and that he was adjacent to it. He put the phone down. The oncologist, Dr. Brianna Solis, was 15 minutes behind schedule. Damon had long since built that into the calculation. He sat. He waited. He watched Nadia write in her notebook and didn't ask what she was writing, because he knew she'd tell him if she wanted him to know. She didn't tell him, which was fine. She had whole interior worlds that were hers. He was glad she had them. Dr. Solis was warm and direct in equal measure. The numbers were stable. The last panel showed the markers they wanted to see. The next 6 weeks would continue current protocol. Come back Thursday for the draw. Call if anything changed between now and then. Stable. That word lived in a specific place in Damon's chest. Not relief exactly. Relief implied that he had allowed himself to feel afraid first. This was something quieter. A temporary loosening. The breath between held breaths. They thanked Dr. Solis. They took the elevator back down. In the lobby, Nadia stopped to read the bulletin board near the main entrance. She read things. All things. Menace. Notices. The backs of cereal boxes. Information interested her the way it interests people who have decided the world is worth paying attention to. Blood drive Thursday, she read. They're short on O-neg. Damon looked at the notice. He was O-negative. Had been a registered donor for 8 years. Had given 9 times. He looked at the notice and he thought about Thursday, which was Nadia's blood draw day, which meant he would already be in the building, which meant he could stop at the donation center on the way in or out, and it would cost him 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and he was already running the calculation. Noted, he said. Nadia looked at him sideways. You're going to do it? I said noted. That's your noted, that means yes. I have a noted that means no. You never use the no one. He held the door for her. She walked through it, smiling, which she did easily and often, and always slightly surprised him with how easy it was for her. After everything, still easy. He drove her home, made dinner, answered the Kellerman emails, called the pharmacy on Halstead, which did not have Nadia's refill ready and would not have it until Friday, which meant he needed to call Dr. Solis's office in the morning and request a bridge supply for 2 days, which he added to the list. He wrote the Kellerman breakdown at 10:30, sent it at 11:15, confirmed receipt at 11:17. Then he sat in the quiet of the apartment with the lights off and the radiator doing its thing, and Nadia asleep with her notebook under her pillow the way she always slept with whatever she was working on. He sat there for a while. He thought about the lobby. He didn't mean to. He'd been very deliberate about not thinking about it. But it was late and he was tired, and the things you're deliberate about during the day have a way of surfacing when the day is done and the list is quiet and there's nothing left to manage. The cart had been 3 feet from the elevator. He had positioned it exactly as he always positioned it. He had been using that position for 11 months. Nobody had said anything before. Nobody had told him it was wrong. He had not been wrong. But that wasn't the point. He knew it wasn't the point. The point was what her voice had sounded like. Not angry, exactly. Worse than angry. Certain. Absolute. The certainty of someone who has never once had to consider whether their assessment of a situation might be incomplete. The equipment is wrong. The person attached to the equipment is therefore wrong. The lobby is worth more than whatever explanation might exist. Move it. 22 people. Not one. He sat with that. He had spent 11 months in that building. And he knew things about it that the people who owned it did not. He knew which air handler needed a bearing replaced. He knew which elevator clutch was failing. He knew the way the marble near the east windows expanded in cold weather and would eventually crack along a specific fault line if the expansion joint wasn't dressed in the next 18 months. He knew things. Nobody asked him what he knew. He closed his eyes. He thought about a thing his mother used to say. She said it when he was young and struggling with the specific injustice that comes from being a child in a world that doesn't explain its rules clearly. She'd sit at the edge of his bed in the dark, and she'd say it low and level like it was a thing she had tested thoroughly and found to be true. You don't get to choose what people do to you. You only get to choose who you are when it happens. He sat with that too. He was still sitting with it at midnight when his phone rang. Not the normal ringtone. Not the Kellerman line. Not the building. The specific tone he had set for Mercy General. The tone that meant his nervous system needed to know this before his brain did. He answered before the second ring, Mr. Wren. A nurse's voice, professional and careful. This is Mercy General. I'm calling about your sister Nadia Wren. She's listed as your contact. His hand was very still on the phone. She came in this evening for her Thursday evening observation check-in. During the appointment, she became lightheaded and her blood pressure dropped significantly. She's stable now. A pause. But we'd like to admit her overnight for monitoring. We'd appreciate if you could come in. The room was very quiet. I'm on my way, he said. He was in the car in 4 minutes, on the highway in 6. He drove in silence, no radio, no mental list. Just the dark highway and the exit signs and the hospital entrance lit up ahead of him. That particular yellow light. The kind that's supposed to feel warm and mostly just feels urgent. He parked. He walked. He moved through the lobby the way he moved through every building. Efficient. Present. Not running, because running in hospital lobbies frightens people. And frightening people is not useful. The 4th floor nursing station. A nurse named Paulette, who was still somehow there at this hour, and who looked at him and said, Nadia's in room 412B. She's awake. She's asking for you. He walked down the corridor. He found the room. He opened the door. Nadia was propped against 3 pillows with her notebook on her lap, pen in hand, writing in the low light of the bedside lamp. She looked up when he came in. She was pale, paler than the morning, but she was writing, which meant she was herself. You didn't have to come, she said. I know, I'm fine, I know. He sat in the chair beside her bed, the vinyl chair. The kind that existed in every hospital room in the world. He sat in it and he looked at her and she looked back at him, and neither of them said anything for a while. Then she held out the notebook. He took it, looked at the page. She'd been writing a poem. It was about a window, and a city outside the window, and the way the city kept going regardless of whether you were watching or not. It was quiet and precise and true in the specific way her best writing always was. He handed it back without speaking. She took it, kept writing, and Damon sat in the vinyl chair in room 412B and kept watch the way he had always kept watch, and would go on keeping watch for as long as she needed him to. Somewhere above them on the 6th floor of Mercy General, a room had been prepared, a bed adjusted, a medical file opened, a name at the top of the admission form, Voss, Elton, age 68, emergency contact, Voss, Zara. But Damon didn't know that yet. He was just sitting in a chair next to his sister, listening to her write. Mercy General at 2 in the morning had a sound all its own. Not silence. Never silence. Something closer to a held breath. Monitors beeping in distant rooms. The squeak of a nurse's shoe on linoleum. The low hum of the elevator arriving and departing. Arriving and departing. A building breathing on behalf of the people inside it who were too busy fighting to breathe properly themselves. Damon had been in this chair for 4 hours. The vinyl chair. Room 412B. He had learned the exact angle at which the chair back met the seat. He had learned which way to shift his weight to stop the faint creak it made when he moved. He had catalogued the water stain on the ceiling tile above the window. He had counted the lines of Nadia's last 3 poems as she wrote them, not reading them, just watching the pen move across the page in the way that told him she was present. Focused. Still herself. She fell asleep at 11:47. Notebook still open on her chest. Pen loosely in her fingers. Her face in sleep looked younger than 22. It looked like the face of the kid he had driven to school every morning. For 4 years in their mother's third-hand Civic, the heater broken. Both of them in their coats. Nadia drawing horses in the fog on the passenger window. He had never told her that was one of his favorite memories. He should probably tell her that. He added it to the list. At 2:15, he left the room to get coffee from the machine on the third floor, because the fourth floor machine had been out of order for 9 days, and he knew this the way he knew all the broken things in buildings he spent time in. He took the stairs, came back, sat back down. The coffee was bad. He drank it anyway. He was on his second cup and reading the Kellerman pump specs on his phone when the door opened. Not his door, the room across the hall. A flurry of activity. 2 nurses moving fast. A cart wheeled in. Voices low and clipped in the way medical voices go when urgency is real and performance would waste time. He watched through the open door for a moment. Then he looked back at Nadia. Still asleep. Pen still loosely in her fingers. Notebook still rising and falling with her chest. He looked back at the hall. The commotion settled. One nurse came out, pulled the door most of the way closed, walked quickly toward the elevator. Her face was the face of a person, managing several things simultaneously and not dropping any of them. Damon recognized that face. He saw it in the mirror fairly often. He went back to the pump specs. He did not sleep. At 6:12 in the morning, Dr. Adezes Okafor came into room 412B. She was 50 years old, and she moved with the authority of someone who had been the most competent person in every room she had entered for approximately 3 decades, and had stopped needing to announce it. Short natural hair, close cropped, reading glasses on a cord around her neck, a tablet in her left hand that she held the way experienced doctors hold tablets, like a tool they know how to use rather than a prop they're obligated to carry. She looked at Nadia first, then at Damon. Then at the coffee cup in his hand. How long have you been here? Since 11. Have you slept? I have coffee. She looked at the cup. That's not what I asked, I'm aware. She pulled the rolling stool from the corner and sat on it without asking permission, which he respected. People who ask permission to sit in hospital rooms are people who haven't spent enough time in them. She opened Nadia's chart on her tablet and studied it for a moment in silence. Her pressure is better, she said. Back inside normal range as of 4:30. The drop last night was significant, but not in a way that changes her current protocol. We'll keep her through today for observation and discharge tomorrow morning if the afternoon panel comes back clean. He nodded. Okay. She needs to be eating more. Her weight is down from last month. I know. I'm working on it. What does she like? Anything with lemon. And those little orange crackers, the fish-shaped ones. Dr. Okafor made a note on her tablet. I'll have the nutritionist come by this afternoon. Nadia can tell her directly. Teenagers like to be consulted. She's 22. A pause. She looks younger. I know. He looked at his sister. She is younger than she should be for what she's dealing with. Dr. Okafor was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that wasn't absence, that was presence. The kind that said I heard that and it matters, and I'm not going to paper over it with something efficient. Then she said, Mr. Wren, I need to discuss something with you, separate from Nadia's immediate situation. He looked up. Last night we ran a full panel on Nadia as part of admissions. Standard protocol. Part of that panel involves typing for rare antigens in case she requires a transfusion during treatment. She set the tablet in her lap. Nadia has a rare antigen profile. Not dangerous on its own, but it means that if she ever needs a transfusion, she can't receive standard O-neg blood without risk of reaction. She needs a very specific match. Damon was very still. We ran the match query through our donor database. A pause. You're registered with us. You donated here in 2021, and again in 2023. Yes, we ran your profile against hers. Silence. You're a match, she said. A full compatibility match for her antigen profile, which is extremely rare. It means that if Nadia needs a transfusion at any point during her treatment, you are the safest possible source. The room was very quiet. He heard the monitor. He heard the elevator down the hall. He heard the sound of the city outside the window. Chicago beginning its day without caring what was happening in room 412B on the 4th floor of Mercy General. Okay, he said. His voice was steady. Because of course it was. What do you need from me? Dr. Okafor looked at him for a moment longer than the question required. The way doctors look at family members who respond to difficult information with immediate practicality instead of emotion. Sometimes it's denial. Sometimes it's shock. And sometimes, she had learned over 30 years, it's just a person who has been managing hard things for so long that calm is no longer a choice. It's the only mode they have left. We'd like to take a precautionary donation today, she said. 1 unit. Store it specifically for her. So if she needs it, we have it immediately without needing to contact you and wait. Fine. When? Whenever you're ready. There's no urgency today. But sooner is better. I can do it now. She looked at him again. Have you eaten? I have coffee, Mr. Wren. I'll eat after. She considered this. She was clearly computing the gap between what she should recommend and what this particular man was going to do, regardless of her recommendation. She came to the correct conclusion. I'll have someone from the donation center come up at 7, she said. Eat something first. There are crackers at the nurse's station. Not the fish-shaped ones, but close. He almost smiled, almost. She stood from the rolling stool, smoothed her coat. She was almost to the door when she paused, turned back, looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. Something professional and something else underneath it. There's another matter, she said, and I want to be careful how I say this. He waited. Last night we had an emergency admission on the 6th floor. A patient with a rare hematological condition. Very serious. We ran their profile through our database this morning, looking for compatible donors. She stopped. Your profile came up again. Damon looked at her. It's the same antigen combination, she said. Your blood is compatible with both patients, which is statistically speaking extraordinarily unlikely. But it's what the data shows. He let that sit for a moment. How serious, he said. The patient on 6 is in more immediate danger than Nadia right now. Their condition deteriorated overnight. They need a transfusion within the next several hours, or we're looking at organ stress. The monitor beeped. The elevator arrived somewhere down the hall. Chicago outside the window, still not caring. You can't compel a donation, she said. I want to be clear about that. You've already agreed to donate for Nadia, and we're grateful for that. This would be a separate decision. Voluntary. And I would understand completely if you said no. Damon looked at Nadia. Pen still in her fingers. Notebook still on her chest. Her face younger than it should be. He looked back at Dr. Okafor. Who is the patient on 6? She hesitated. I'm not able to share that information. Is it someone who has any idea that I exist? A pause. I don't believe so. He sat with that. A stranger. Someone who didn't know him. Someone who had no idea that the answer to whether they lived through the next several hours was sitting in a vinyl chair on the 4th floor, drinking bad coffee. He thought about his mother at the edge of his bed. You don't get to choose what people do to you. You only get to choose who you are when it happens. Schedule both, he said. Nadia first. Then the patient on 6. Whatever time you need between them, Dr. Okafor looked at him. Really looked at him. The way a person looks at something they weren't expecting. Mr. Wren, I need to be clear. 2 donations in close succession, combined with the fact that you've been awake all night, will leave you significantly depleted. You should know that going in. I know. You should have someone drive you home afterward. I'll manage. That's not what she stopped. Tried again. Is there someone who can be with you today? He thought about that for a moment. The honest answer was no. There was Nadia, and there was him, and those were the people. But Nadia was in a hospital bed, and he was the person who managed things, and the management required him to be functional, and so he would be functional. I'll be fine, he said. She looked at him for one more moment. Then she nodded once. Quietly. The way people nod when they've decided to respect a choice they might personally disagree with. 7 o'clock, she said. Nurse's station has crackers. She left. He sat. He looked at Nadia, at her hand around the pen, at the rise and fall of the notebook on her chest. Then he got up, walked to the nurse's station, got 2 packets of crackers that were not the fish-shaped kind but were close, walked back, sat down, ate both packets standing at the window looking at the city, Chicago, in the early morning, gray and enormous and indifferent. The lake somewhere beyond the buildings, invisible from here, but present the way things are present when you know they're there even if you can't see them. The L running somewhere to the north, lights in office windows, people beginning their days. He was still at the window when Nadia woke up at 6:50. She opened her eyes and saw him standing there and said, "You didn't sleep." "Good morning, Damon. How do you feel?" She considered this, honestly, the way she considered most things. Like I slept in a hospital bed, so somewhere between bad and fine. She pushed herself up against the pillows, looked at the crackers wrapper on the chair. "Did you eat those?" "Yes." "Were they the fish ones?" "No, tragic." She picked up her notebook, looked at the last thing she'd written, made a face. "I hate when I write things half asleep. It's either the best thing I've ever done or complete nonsense, and I can never tell until the next day. Which is this?" She read it. Still can't tell. She looked up at him. "What's happening today?" He told her about the donation, about the precautionary unit for her. He did not tell her about the patient on the 6th floor, not because he was hiding it, because it was not information she needed right now, and information she didn't need was not information he was going to give her. She had enough. She listened to the part he told her, quiet, attentive. Then she said, "Your own egg." "Yes, and you're going to give them a unit of your blood right now. After being here all night, at 7. Damon, it's fine. You're going to be pale. I'm always pale. You're going to need soup. I'll be fine. I'm going to ask them to bring you soup. You're a patient. You don't get to order food for other people. Watch me." She was already pressing the call button. He sat back down in the vinyl chair and let her order him soup from a nurse who was clearly charmed by the request and said she'd see what she could do. And then Nadia put the call button down and opened her notebook again and started writing, and Damon sat in the chair and looked at the ceiling and thought about the patient on the 6th floor who had no idea that the donation room was on the 2nd floor. Small, 4 beds separated by curtains, a window that looked out at the parking structure. A refrigeration unit that hummed at a frequency Damon clocked as slightly high, running warm. Someone should check the coolant level. The faint smell of antiseptic and something floral that wasn't quite managing to cover the antiseptic. The phlebotomist was a man named Garrett. Precise hands. Efficient. He checked Damon's vitals without comment, noted the blood pressure with a small nod that meant satisfactory, and set up the line. "You need to tell me if you feel lightheaded," Garrett said. "Any dizziness, nausea, or tingling?" "Immediately." "Understood. Do you have someone here with you, my sister?" "She's on 4. Is she able to—" "She's a patient." Garrett paused, looked at him, then went back to setting up the line with the expression of a man recalibrating his follow-up questions. The needle went in. Damon watched the ceiling. The same water-stained monitoring activity he'd been doing on 4, applied to a different ceiling. This one had a crack along the junction where the wall met the tile. Hairline. Cosmetic. Not structural. He filed it and moved on. He thought about Nadia's poem, the one about the window, the city that kept going regardless. He thought about the Kellerman pump specs. He thought about nothing at all, which was harder than it sounded. He was on the 3rd floor of the elevator. Not Damon. The other one. Zara Voss had arrived at Mercy General at 11:40 the previous night, which was 11 minutes after she received the phone call she had spent 8 years in business trying to never be unprepared for, and which had arrived anyway, the way those calls always arrive, when she was in the middle of something else, in this case, a conference call with the West Coast office that became immediately irrelevant. Her father, Elton Voss, 68 years old. A man who had built a financial empire across the Midwest, with a combination of intelligence and stubbornness that his daughter had inherited in full, and which neither of them had ever once acknowledged as inheritance. A man who had been hiding a hematological condition from his family and his medical team and his board of directors for what Dr. Adeze Okafor, delivering information with the quiet efficiency of someone who had delivered it before, said was approximately 4 years. 4 years. He had known for 4 years. He had been managing it quietly, his own way, the Elton Voss way, which meant without involving anyone who might worry or question or limit him. And then his body had made a unilateral decision at 9:15 on a Thursday evening, and that was that. Zara had walked into Mercy General in her work clothes because there had been no time to change and no version of this where she was going home first. She had walked through the main lobby in her wine-red bodycon dress and her silk-pressed hair and her heels, and she had felt, for the first time in a long time, completely aware of how much none of that mattered. The heels on the hospital linoleum. The sound she made walking. Not like the lobby of Voss Capital where the marble caught every step and amplified it. Here it was muffled, absorbed, the sound landing and disappearing like it had never been made. She found her father on the 6th floor. He was awake, pale, smaller than she remembered, though she had seen him 3 weeks ago, which was the terrifying thing about illness, how quickly it could revise a person's dimensions. He had tubes in his arm and a monitor ticking beside him, and he looked at her when she came in with an expression that was half apology and half the stubborn refusal to fully apologize. That was the most Elton thing she had ever seen. "I was going to tell you," he said. "Were you? When it was manageable. And now it's less manageable." She sat in the chair beside his bed, the vinyl chair. She did not think about her dress or the chair or any of it. She took his hand, he let her. She had sat with him through most of the night. He slept in stretches. She did not sleep. She watched the monitor. She answered texts from Pierce Aldridge, who had somehow already heard, which told her things about Pierce that she filed away for later, and from her assistant, and from 2 board members whose concern she processed and set aside and would deal with when she was back in a room with better lighting and a clearer head. At some point, after 4, she had stretched out on the small couch in the corner of the room with her coat over her like a blanket and closed her eyes, and not exactly slept but drifted into the shallow water at the edge of sleep, aware enough to hear every monitor change, too depleted to do anything about it. At 6:30 she was awake. Coffee from the machine on the 5th floor, which was better than the 4th floor machine and considerably better than the 3rd floor machine. A hierarchy she had established through direct sampling over the course of the night. She stood at the window on the 6th floor and looked at the same city. Damon was looking at from the 4th floor and felt it in the same way. Enormous, indifferent, going on. Dr. Okafor came to the 6th floor at 7:15. Zara knew her by name now. Dr. Okafor had been the one to speak to her the previous night when she arrived. Direct, clear, not without compassion, but the kind of compassion that doesn't interfere with information. Zara had found that immediately trustworthy. "His pressure is responding," Dr. Okafor said. "He's going to need a transfusion today. His hematological profile is complex and we've been identifying compatible donors." "Have you found one?" A pause. "Yes, we have." Something in the pause made Zara look up from her fat cup. Something in the way Dr. Okafor said yes. Like the word was carrying more weight than it should. "Is there a problem?" Zara said. "No, there's a donor. A willing donor. The donation is happening now or will begin shortly." A beat. "I wanted you to know we have it handled." Zara nodded. "Who is it? The donor?" "I can't share patient information." "Is it a blood bank supply? Or a directed donation, doctor?" Okafor was quiet for a moment. "It's a voluntary donation from a registered donor in our system. Someone who knows my father. Someone who agreed to donate. That's all I can tell you." Zara looked at her. She was good at reading people. It was the most essential skill she had, and she had been honing it. Essential skill since she was old enough to understand that the people in the rooms with her father were not always saying the same thing they were thinking. She could usually see the gap. The gap right now was not small, but Dr. Okafor was not going to fill it. That was also clear. "Thank you," Zara said, "for finding someone." Dr. Okafor nodded, looked at Elton, looked back at Zara. "Your father is going to be difficult about his recovery protocol. He's already been difficult about it for 4 years. I'm aware of how he is. He's going to need someone to not accept that." Zara looked at her father's face through the window of the room, the stubborn line of his jaw even in sleep. "I'm aware of how I am too, doctor." Okafor almost smiled, almost. Then she moved on to the next room, the next patient, the next thing, the way she always did. Zara went back in, sat in the vinyl chair, took his hand again. He opened his eyes. "You're still here," he said. "Where would I go?" "The office, it'll keep." He looked at her, the way fathers look at daughters when they are seeing them clearly for the first time in a while, or perhaps seeing what they've made and trying to work out whether they made it correctly.
"You look tired," he said. "You look worse. Fair."
He closed his eyes, then opened them again. "The board. I'll handle it. Pierce is going to. I know what Pierce is going to do." Her voice was even. "I'll handle it." He looked at her for a moment longer, Then he let go of her hand and reached up and put it on the side of her face, briefly, the way he had done when she was small, and then took it away and closed his eyes again. She sat. She sat for a long time. At 9:40 she went down to the lobby to call Pierce back. She needed to move. She needed to be vertical and mobile, and in a space where she could think. The lobby of Mercy General was busy in the mid-morning way. People arriving, people leaving, people standing at the information desk with the particular posture of people who need something and don't quite know how to ask for it. She stepped to the side of the main entrance, found a spot near the bulletin board, called Pierce. He answered on the first ring, which told her he had been watching for her name. Zara, how is he? Stable, critical but responding to treatment. And you? How are you holding up? Fine. Pierce, I need to know what you said to Forsyth and Kimball last night. A pause. Short. Controlled. I reached out to let them know what was happening. As a courtesy, it was 11 o'clock at night. They would have wanted to know, would they? Or would they have wanted to hear your assessment of the situation at 11 o'clock at night while I was sitting in a hospital room with my father? Silence. I'm going to be back in the office tomorrow, she said. I'd like to meet first thing. Of course, he smoothed. Unrattled. Or performing unrattled, which with Pierce was sometimes the same thing. Whatever you need. And Zara, if there's anything at all. I know where you are, she said, and hung up. She stood there for a moment, looked at the bulletin board beside her without really seeing it. Notices as about visiting hours. A blood drive flyer. A thank you card from a patient pinned up with a yellow tack. And then something shifted. Not a decision exactly. More like the moment before a decision when your attention narrows, without you telling it to. She looked at the bulletin board and she read the blood drive flyer. And she thought about what Dr. Okafor had said. Voluntary donation from a registered donor in our system. The pause before she said yes, the weight in the word. She took out her phone. She called her assistant. I need access to the employee portal, she said. Not the executive summary. The full directory. I can get that for you in 10 minutes. Do it now. She went back upstairs. Sat outside the 6th floor ICU. Opened her phone when the portal link came through. Typed in the search field. She didn't have a name. She had almost nothing. What she had was a donated unit of blood traveling through a tube into her father's arm. What she had was a doctor who wouldn't say who. What she had was the memory of a pause, and the instinct she had learned to trust above almost everything else, which was telling her that the pause mattered. She thought about the lobby. She thought about it the way she thought about most things. Efficiently. Directly. Without excessive examination. The cart had been in front of the elevator. She had addressed it. She had moved on. It was not something she had thought about again until now, sitting in a hospital corridor, and she wasn't entirely sure why she was thinking about it now. Except the way the man had moved the cart. Without argument. Without expression. The incline of his head. One sentence. I apologize, it won't happen again. Not defensive. Not resentful. Not performing dignity because someone was watching. Just, quiet, complete in itself. Like a door that closes without slamming. She looked at her phone. She pulled up the full staff directory. Filtered by location, lobby cleaning crew, day shift. 3 names. She looked at all 3. Photos and basic role data. First one, wrong shift. Second one started last week. Third one, Damon Wren, day shift. Lobby maintenance executive corridor. She looked at the photo, looked at it for a moment, then she scrolled down. Prior role listed, she almost scrolled past it. She didn't. Senior mechanical engineer, Kellerman Industrial Systems, 8 years. She stopped. Read it again. 8 years as a senior mechanical engineer, specialty in industrial systems design. Degree with distinction. Left the role to address a family medical situation. Currently, lobby maintenance, day shift. Voss Capital Tower. She sat very still. She scrolled further, emergency contact. 1 entry. Nadia Wren, 22 years old. Patient, Mercy General Hospital, 4th floor. The same building. He was in this building right now. Or had been. Or was. His emergency contact was a patient on the 4th floor of the same hospital where her father was on the 6th floor, receiving a transfusion from an unknown donor. She closed the app. Opened it again. Closed it again. Her coffee was cold. She did not notice. She thought about the bearing in the elevator. She thought about the third-floor incident report from Tuesday. She almost never read incident reports, but her assistant had flagged it because it involved building equipment and a near miss, and she had read it in the car on the way to a meeting and not thought about it again. Elevator B, third floor. Secondary car. Doors failed to respond. 2 employees evacuated safely. Responding party D. Wren, maintenance staff. Manual release performed. Equipment secured. D. Wren, she sat with that. She sat with all of it. The cart, the elevator, the engineering file, the emergency contact on the 4th floor, the donor whose name she didn't have. The pause in Dr. Okafor's voice. She could ask Dr. Okafor directly. She knew Dr. Okafor would say no. She could ask her assistant to cross-reference the donor database. She knew that was not something she was going to do. Not because she couldn't, because there were things you didn't do even when you could, and pulling a private citizen's medical donation record to satisfy a hunch was somewhere on that list. So she sat, and then her phone buzzed. Pierce again. Not a call. A text. Short. Efficient. Sent the updated org proposal to your inbox. Includes some staffing adjustments for Q4 consideration. Think you'll find it addresses several open questions. She opened her email, found the attachment, opened it. The proposal was 13 pages. She read it in 6 minutes. She was a fast reader. She had always been a fast reader, and she was very good at finding the thing that wasn't supposed to be noticed. On page 9, a list of staffing adjustments, framed as efficiency optimization, role consolidations, redundancy eliminations, headcount reductions. Line 43, Wren D. Lobby maintenance, day shift. Role to be consolidated with evening crew. Effective end of month. She read it twice. She put the phone face down on her knee. She looked at the corridor, the nurses moving, the lights, the steady efficient hum of a building that was keeping people alive. Her father's blood pressure was rising, because someone in this building, right now, was in a donation bed somewhere, depleted from a night of no sleep and whatever it costs, to give the thing your body makes for reasons that had nothing to do with anyone watching or thanking him or knowing his name. And Pierce had put him on a termination list. She picked up the phone. She did not call Pierce. She went back to her father's room. She sat in the vinyl chair. He was asleep. She watched his chest rise and fall, the monitor ticking, the drip running steady. She sat there for a long time, and at 11:15, she stood up, smoothed her dress, and went to find Dr. Okafor. She found her in the corridor outside the 4th floor nursing station. Not the 6th floor, the 4th floor. Dr. Okafor was writing something on her tablet. She looked up when she heard Zara's heels on the linoleum. Her expression was professional, careful, and something else underneath it that Zara had learned to read in the last 12 hours as the particular look of a person who knows more than they are saying and is deciding, moment by moment, how much of that is theirs to say. The donor, Zara said. I know you can't tell me who. I'm not asking you to tell me who. Dr. Okafor waited. I'm asking if the donor is okay. A pause, long enough to be an answer of a kind. He's depleted, Dr. Okafor said. He donated twice in a short period. He was awake all night. He refused to let me arrange a ride home. She said it evenly, but each sentence landed like something dropped from a height. He is, in my medical opinion, exactly fine enough to walk out of here under his own power, which he will do, because that appears to be the only way he operates. Zara looked at her. He was already in the building, Dr. Okafor said. That's why we were able to reach him quickly. Zara looked down the corridor. The doors, the room numbers, 412, 412. She looked back at Dr. Okafor. The doctor held her gaze. She did not confirm anything. She did not need to. Thank you, Zara said. Dr. Okafor nodded. Once. Then she went back to her tablet. Zafra stood in the corridor, the 4th floor of Mercy General. The nurses moving. The monitor sounds. The elevator arriving and departing. The city outside the windows going on the way it always went on. She looked at room 412B. The door was mostly closed. Through the gap she could see the edge of a bed, the edge of a yellow blanket, the edge of a chair, vinyl, pushed close to the bed. Empty. He was gone already. She stood there for a moment longer than made sense. Then she turned around, took the elevator to 6, went back to her father. She sat in the chair, and she took his hand, and he opened his eyes and looked at her, and she looked at him, and neither of them said anything, which was fine. Some things needed to be said later, when she knew better how to say them, when she had stopped feeling like the floor was slightly tilted in a direction she didn't have a word for yet. Damon went back to work on day 6. Not because he was ready. Ready was not a category he spent much time in. Ready implied you had the option to wait until conditions improved. He did not have that option. He had a cart. He had a schedule. He had a building that accumulated dirt whether or not his sister was in a hospital bed, and whether or not his arms still felt faintly hollow from giving blood twice in 24 hours. So he went back. 5:15 in the morning. Service entrance. The same route. The same marble floors. The same gold lobby lights doing their expensive impression of warmth. His body was running at maybe 70%, and he knew it the way a mechanic knows an engine running low. Not broken. Not stopping, just operating within reduced parameters and requiring more conscious management than usual. He managed it. He did not think about the 6th floor of Mercy General. He did not think about a man he had never met whose name he still did not know, whose color had come back because of something that had come out of Damon's arm. He did not think about Zara Voss or the wine-red dress, or the 22 people who had found something very interesting to look at in the floor that Tuesday morning. He thought about the bearing in the 14th floor air handler, still vibrating, still not fixed. He thought about Nadia's discharge papers, which he had collected the previous morning, and the follow-up schedule clipped to them, and the pharmacy refill he had successfully acquired after one additional phone call to Dr. Solis's office and 11 minutes on hold. He thought about the Kellerman clients who needed a revised load estimate by end of week. He mopped. By 7:30 the lobby was filling. The early arrivals, the nod from the accounting woman, the IT guy in headphones who had never once looked up in 11 months and whom Damon had decided was probably fine, just someone who needed boundaries. Fair enough. By 7:50 he was on the 3rd floor. He passed elevator B on his way to the east corridor. The doors were closed. A small yellow maintenance tag hung from the handle. Someone had finally gotten to it. He looked at the tag, looked at the doors, moved on. At 8:40 his phone buzzed in his pocket. He stepped to the side of the corridor and checked it. Security desk. Lobby level. He read the message twice. Then he put his phone away and continued his route. He did not change his pace. He finished the east corridor, finished the connecting hallway, returned his cart to the equipment room in the basement, changed out of his uniform in the small locker room. Gray Henley. Dark jacket. The one with the worn left cuff he kept meaning to replace. He took the elevator to the lobby level. The security desk was staffed by a man named Warren, who had been there longer than Damon, and who had the calm, territorial competence of a person who understood that his job was to know everything that happened in this building, and to make sure nothing happened that shouldn't. Warren had always nodded at Damon. The kind of nod that communicated professional respect without overextending into conversation. Warren nodded now. Executive office called down, he said. Ms. Voss's assistant asked if you were in today. A pause. I said yes. They asked if you could go up. Damon looked at him. You don't have to, Warren said, flat. Informational. The way Warren said most things, I know. Damon looked at the elevator bank. The executive elevator. The same one. What floor? 38. He rode up in silence. 38 floors. He watched the numbers. He was not nervous. He was not angry. He was not anything in particular. He was a person who had learned a long time ago that emotions were most useful when they were acknowledged and then set aside until the situation was resolved and there was space to actually feel them. Right now there was a situation. He would acknowledge it. He would navigate it. He would feel whatever he felt about it later, probably at midnight, sitting in the dark with the radiator. The elevator opened. A different world up here. Quieter. The kind of quiet that comes from expensive materials absorbing sound. Carpet that cost more per square foot than Damon made in a day. Glass walls looking out over Chicago in every direction. The lake visible from here, actually visible, a gray-blue strip at the edge of the skyline. a woman at the reception desk. Young, professional. She looked up when he stepped off the elevator and did not show surprise at his jacket or his worn cuff or anything about him, which he noted as a data point about whoever trained her. "Mr. Wren," she said. "She's expecting you. I'll let her know you're here." He waited 2 minutes. Then the assistant came back and said she could see him now, and gestured toward the corner office, and he walked toward it and opened the door. Zara Voss was standing at the window, not behind the desk, not positioned to use the room's architecture against him, the way people with large offices sometimes do, consciously or not. Standing at the window with her hands at her sides, looking at Michigan Avenue, the way you look at something when your eyes are there, but your mind is somewhere without a view. She was wearing a bodycon dress in a deep burgundy, not the wine red from Tuesday, a different one. Silk-pressed hair falling straight and smooth. The same presence, the same precise beauty, but something in her posture was different, less arranged, like she had been standing there for a while and had stopped performing anything. She turned when she heard him. They looked at each other. No one said anything for a moment, which was fine. Sometimes a moment needs to be a moment before it can be anything else. Then she said, "Please sit down." He sat in the chair across from her desk. She came away from the window. She did not sit behind the desk. She sat in the chair beside his, angled toward him, which was a choice. He registered it. She did not preamble. "I went through your complete file," she said. "Not just the current role, the full employment history. 8 years at Kellerman Industrial. Senior systems engineer. You were the lead on 3 of their largest infrastructure installations." She paused. "You left to care for your sister." "Yes. You didn't return to engineering afterward." He said nothing. She looked at him steadily. No euphemism, no softening. "I'd like to offer you a consulting role, project-based, flexible hours, structured around Nadia's treatment schedule and your own. Full health coverage for both of you, effective immediately." She said the last 2 words without emphasis, like they were just words, but they landed somewhere specific in his chest because he knew exactly what immediately meant. Nadia's next infusion was in 9 days. The insurance gap he had been managing around for 7 months, like a load-bearing wall he was not allowed to touch, immediately meant the wall could be touched. The compensation is commensurate with your experience level, not your current role. He let the silence sit. She waited. That was notable too. She could have filled it. She had the words and the authority and the room. She didn't. She waited for him like she had decided his answer was worth waiting for. He looked at her. He thought about Tuesday morning. The cart, her voice, the 22 people, the floor he had mopped afterward, the way he had mopped it the same as the rest. Even strokes, not because it deserved it, because that was how he mopped. He thought about the 6th floor, the blood in the bag, the man he had never met. He thought about what Nadia had said, sitting at the kitchen table in her yellow robe, pen in hand, "You don't know that," and Nadia saying back, "I know people." He thought about his mother at the edge of his bed, and then he stopped thinking and just said what was true. "I appreciate the offer," he said. "I do, but I haven't seen you change. I've seen you feel guilty, and those are 2 different things." Zara looked at him, not offended, not defensive. Something more complicated than either, like she had prepared for several possible responses, and this was not the one she had prepared for most, and she was recalibrating. "You're right," she said. He waited. "I don't know how to argue with that, because you're right." She looked at the window, looked back at him. "I looked at a cleaning cart and I made a complete judgment about the person attached to it, in front of 22 people. And then I went upstairs and signed a document with your name on it, without reading it carefully enough to notice." A pause. "And then you opened an elevator, and you saved 2 of my employees with your bare hands, and you didn't tell anyone. And then you gave blood twice in one night for people you didn't know, one of whom was my father." The last sentence sat in the room. He had not known she knew. Something in his face shifted. Just slightly. She saw it. "Dr. Okafor didn't tell me directly," she said. "She followed every privacy rule. I figured it out." He looked at the window. Chicago outside. The lake he could see from up here that he couldn't see from the 4th floor. "She said you refused a ride home," Zara said. "I was fine. She said you ate 2 packets of crackers. I ate before I donated." crackers. They were fine. Something shifted in her face. Not a smile. The place just before a smile that isn't quite ready yet. My father, she said, is impossible about his medical team. He's been hiding this condition for 4 years because he didn't want anyone to limit him. He's going to be a nightmare about recovery. A pause. He asked me this morning who the donor was. I told him I didn't know. That's true. He said it didn't matter. He said whoever it was, he hoped they knew that a stranger saying thank you in a hospital room was insufficient for what they'd done, and that when he was out of that bed, he intended to find a more adequate response. She looked at him. My father is not a man who says things like that. Damon was quiet. So. She looked at her hands, then at him. You're right that I owe you more than a job offer delivered before I've proven anything. I know that. But I didn't know what else to do today, and I thought doing something was better than doing nothing. He looked at her for a long moment. She held the look. Didn't flinch from it. Didn't fill the silence with more words. Just sat with the discomfort of being seen clearly by someone who had good reason to see her unfavorably. And didn't look away. That was something. Not everything, but something. I'll think about it, he said. She nodded. Once, that's fair. He stood up. She stood up. He moved toward the door. Mr. Wren. He turned. She looked at him. The termination list. Pierce Aldridge submitted it. Your name was on it. She said it without deflection. I removed it before I came to work this morning, but you should know it existed. He looked at her. I thought you should know, she said. He nodded slowly. Then he turned and walked out. The elevator, the lobby. Warren's nod at the security desk. The service entrance. The street. Chicago mid-morning. Cold and clear. The kind of day that has no patience for anything indirect. He walked to his car. Sat in it for a moment without starting it. He thought about her face. Not the face from Tuesday. The face in that office. The one that had stopped performing. The one that had said you're right without flinching, and then said the harder thing, the thing about the termination list. The thing she didn't have to say. You didn't have to say that. You said it anyway. He thought about his mother. He started the car. Drove to Mercy General. Parked. Walked through the lobby. Past the bulletin board. Past the blood drive flyer. Up to the 4th floor.
Room 412B.
Nadia was sitting up in bed with her notebook and a bowl of soup that had gone cold, and a highlighter she was using for reasons that were not immediately apparent. She looked up. How'd it go? Fine. That's the complicated fine face. I don't have a complicated fine face. You have about 11 faces and I have catalogued all of them. She put the highlighter down. Sit. He sat. She looked at him. He looked at her. Outside the window, Chicago. Inside the room, the monitor, the low hum of the hospital. She offered me a job, he said. Nadia was quiet for exactly 1 second, and I said I'd think about it. Because I don't know yet if she's changed or if she feels bad. Nadia considered this. The way she considered things she was taking seriously, which was the same way she considered everything. Fully, without shortcuts. What's the difference, she said. Practically speaking. Feeling bad goes away when the guilt goes away. Changing doesn't. She looked at him for a long moment. You've been thinking about this for a while. Since the lobby. She nodded slowly. Then she picked up her highlighter and made a mark in her notebook that appeared to underline something she had written earlier. He didn't ask what. You'll know, she said. When you see it, see what? The difference. She looked up. You're good at reading systems. People are just more complicated systems. He looked at her. 22 years old. Lymphoma. Yellow robe in a hospital bed. Reading everything. Missing nothing. You're a little terrifying, he said. I know. She picked up her spoon. Looked at the cold soup. Can you ask them to heat this up? He took the bowl. Went to the nurse's station. Came back. Set it in front of her. She ate. He sat in the vinyl chair and thought about Zara Voss saying you're right without flinching, and then saying the harder thing after. He was not ready to decide anything yet, but he was thinking. On day 7, Zara stood in the security office on the basement level of Voss Capital and watched herself on a screen. The footage was from Tuesday, the lobby camera, 7:22 to 8:58 in the morning. She had asked Warren for access, and Warren had looked at her with the neutral expression he brought to requests that surprised him. and then said yes without asking why. She watched herself walk in. The heels on the marble, the two assistants, the phone. The moment she stopped, the moment she said the 4 sentences, the moment she walked to the elevator, then she kept watching. At 8:42 the footage showed 2 people emerging from the stairwell door near the east corridor. She recognized one of them as a junior associate from accounting. The second one was walking slightly unsteady, hand against the wall. They sat on the floor just inside the stairwell door, out of the main lobby's sightline. Damon appeared 11 seconds later from the direction of the maintenance corridor. He saw them immediately. He said something to the associate. He went back down the corridor. He came back with tools. He took the elevator to 3. She switched to the 3rd floor camera. She watched him open that door, 4 minutes and 28 seconds. No team, no radio consultation. Just his hands and the tools and the knowledge of how a door clutch mechanism releases under manual pressure when you know exactly where to apply it. She watched the second woman come through the gap, sit on the floor, press her hands to her face. She watched Damon return the tools to the maintenance corridor, pick up his mop, continue the east hallway. She watched it 3 times. Then she asked Warren to pull the maintenance log for elevator B going back 6 weeks. Warren pulled it. She read it. Damon had logged the door clutch degradation on day -43, again on day -30, again on day -18. Each entry clear, specific, including the failure mode and the recommended repair timeline. Each entry followed by no action recorded. She closed the log. She sat in the security office for a moment, in the kind of quiet that comes when you have been given an exact and undeniable picture of something you should have seen a long time ago and didn't. She did not feel sorry for herself. That was not a luxury she allowed. She felt something more useful, the specific discomfort of someone who is good at processing information, and has just processed information that required a change in course. She went back upstairs. She did something she had not done in 4 years of running this company. She walked the building, not the executive floors, the whole building. Starting at the basement, the equipment room, the stairwells, the maintenance corridors, the 3rd floor east hallway, the lobby from the perspective of someone pushing a cart. She walked it with her eyes open. She saw the bearing no one had fixed, the expansion joint no one had addressed, the 3rd floor elevator B still showing a yellow maintenance tag. She saw 5 other things she wrote in her phone that were somewhere between concerning and genuinely hazardous, and that someone had clearly been logging and being ignored about for months. She went back to her office. She called Pierce. He came in with the smooth, unruffled energy of a man who had been managing up for 15 years and had learned to enter every room like he was doing it a favor. He sat across from her desk. He waited. She put her phone on the desk, face up, the email thread visible. You contacted Forsyth and Kimball at 11:14 the night my father was admitted, she said. Not to inform them, to sound out their positions on continuity of leadership. She looked at him. The word you used in your email to Kimball was instability. Pierce's face did not change. You submitted a staffing proposal 2 days later, with a termination on page 9 for an employee you had never supervised, who had never received a negative performance review. She leaned back slightly. An employee who 2 days before that submission had manually evacuated 2 people from a failed elevator in this building, using his own knowledge. Before anyone else arrived, she paused. And who, the night before you sent the email to Forsyth, was in Mercy General donating blood. Silence. I'm going to need your resignation by end of day, she said. I'd prefer it be quiet. That preference will change if it's not quiet. Pierce looked at her for a long moment, the unruffled expression doing more work than it could comfortably hold. You're making a mistake. Possibly, she said. But it's mine to make. He stood, straightened his jacket, looked at her one more time. Then, he walked out. She watched the door close. Then she opened her laptop and started typing. She typed for 4 hours. Not emails. Not memos. Not anything with a PR layer or a legal review flag. She typed the proposal she had been building in her head since she sat in Warren's security office watching the maintenance log. A full restructure of how Voss Capital engaged with its internal workforce. Pay equity audit. Maintenance reporting with mandatory response timelines. Caregiver leave. Health coverage for dependents without the current income tier restrictions that existed for no reason she could identify, except that no one had questioned them. And a consulting role. Flexible. Project-based. Open-ended. Compensation at the senior engineering rate. Health coverage for 2. She typed it clearly. Without performance. The way she wrote when she was not writing for anyone else yet. At 6 she closed the laptop. She went to Mercy General. Not to the 6th floor, where her father was reading the financial news on his tablet and arguing with his cardiologist about his recovery timeline. She had already done that visit this morning. She had sat with him for an hour and listened to him be difficult about his medication. And then she had said, with the specific flat firmness that was her most Elton inheritance, that he was going to follow the protocol or she was going to be very disappointed. And he had looked at her with something that was not quite pride but was adjacent to it, and said, fine. She went to the 4th floor. Room 412B. She stopped outside the door. It was open about 6 inches. She could hear a voice inside. Not Damon. Younger. A woman's voice, light and precise, reading something aloud. A poem. She stood in the hallway and she listened. She did not mean to stand there as long as she did, but the poem was about a building. About the way a building keeps its shape regardless of what happens inside it. About how the walls don't know what they're holding and hold it anyway. And it was quiet and exact and true. And it was clearly written by someone who had been spending a lot of time in buildings that didn't know what they were holding. The voice stopped. A beat of silence. Then Damon's voice. Low. 2 words, that's good. And the younger voice, pleased but not surprised, I know. Zara stood in the hallway for one more moment. Then she turned and walked back to the elevator without knocking. Some things were not hers to walk into. On day 8 she went back. Not to the hospital. To Damon. She knew his shift ended at 9. She waited in her car in the lot adjacent to the service entrance. Not in the executive car. Her own car, a dark grey sedan that she drove herself on the occasions when she wanted to go somewhere without announcing she was going. She was there at 8:50. At 9:12 he came out. Grey Henley, dark jacket, the worn left cuff. He was moving with the steady efficiency he always moved with. Not fast, not slow, just continuous, the way water moves. He saw her car, stopped. She got out. He looked at her. She looked at him. November cold between them. The city going on behind them, indifferent as always. I'm not here to offer you anything, she said. I already did that and you told me the truth about it and you were right. He waited. She reached into her jacket and took out a folded piece of paper. Not a document, not a proposal. Notebook paper, handwritten. She held it out. He looked at it, then at her. Then he took it. I didn't know how to say what I actually wanted to say in an office, she said. I'm better in writing, which is probably something I should fix, but... She stopped. It's not a job offer. It's not an apology in the PR sense. It's just what I saw. When I went through your file. When I watched the security footage. When I sat with my father while your blood was keeping him alive. She looked at him steadily. I thought you should know what someone saw when they finally looked. He held the paper. You don't have to respond, she said. You don't have to do anything with it. I just needed you to have it. She got back in her car. She drove away. He stood in the parking lot and looked at the folded paper in his hand. The cold coming in from the lake. November doing what November does in Chicago, which is to say everything, all at once, without apology. He put the paper in his pocket. He drove to Mercy General. Nadia was awake. Of course she was. It was 9:40, and she ran on a sleep schedule that made no concessions to anything. She was at the window with her notebook, writing something that she covered with her forearm when he came in, which meant it was about him, which he did not comment on. He sat in the vinyl chair. He took the paper out of his pocket. He unfolded it. Zara wrote the way she apparently did everything. Directly. Without excessive decoration. But underneath the directness there was something that cost her. He could feel it in the way certain sentences were shorter than they needed to be, the way you write when you're being careful not to oversay. She wrote about Tuesday, about what she had seen and what she had decided in the 30 seconds between seeing it and speaking. She did not excuse it. She wrote about what her file showed, and what the security footage showed, and what the maintenance log showed, and what all three together told her about a person she had looked at and not seen. She wrote about her father in that room, and the drip in his arm, and what she had understood, sitting there, about the difference between things that can be replaced and things that cannot. She wrote, "I am not asking you to forgive me before I have earned it. I am asking you to know that I am trying to understand what earning it looks like, and that I am going to keep trying regardless of what you decide." She signed it with her first name only, no title, no company name, just Zara. He folded the paper, he looked at Nadia. She had given up pretending to be absorbed in her notebook and was watching him with the full attentive patience of someone who has been waiting for this moment and is not going to waste it by saying the wrong thing first. "Well," she said. "Well, is it the guilty kind or the changing kind?" He looked at the folded paper in his hands. He thought about the 4 sentences in the lobby. He thought about 22 people looking at the floor. He thought about the maintenance logs and the elevator and the termination list and the woman standing in a hospital parking lot in the cold, holding out a handwritten piece of notebook paper. "I don't know yet," he said. Nadia nodded slowly, like that was the correct answer, like she had expected exactly that answer, and found it satisfying in the way that true things are satisfying even when they're incomplete. "You'll know," she said. "You always know." He looked at her. "Eventually," she added. He put the paper back in his pocket. Outside the window, Chicago. The lake. The lights coming on across the city as the sky went dark. The L somewhere to the north. The enormous ordinary continuity of it all. He sat in the vinyl chair and he did not yet know, and that was fine. Not knowing and sitting with the not knowing was its own kind of answer. A holding pattern. A system in assessment mode, gathering data, running the calculation, waiting for the output that would tell him which way to move. He was patient. He had always been patient. The radiator would knock, the city would keep going. And in the morning he would get up at 3:47 and make coffee, and check Nadia's results and put on his uniform and do the thing in front of him, whatever it turned out to be. Damon read the letter 4 times, not all at once. Once that night in the vinyl chair while Nadia pretended to be writing. Once in his car in the Mercy General parking lot with the engine running and the heat on and Chicago going dark around him. Once the next morning at 4:15 at the kitchen table with coffee he forgot to drink until it was cold. And once more on day 9 standing in the equipment room in the basement of Voss Capital with his cart locked and 5 minutes before his shift began and the building silent above him. 4 times. Each time he was looking for the same thing. The thing that would tell him which kind it was. The guilty kind or the changing kind. The kind that lasts 60 days or the kind that lasts 60 years. He was reading it the way he read systems. Looking for where the load was actually being carried. Looking for which supports were structural and which were decorative and would fail under pressure. He found something different each time. The first time he found the apology. Real. Not performed. The kind that names the specific thing it is apologizing for, rather than apologizing in general, which is what people do when they want credit for remorse without the discomfort of precision. She had been precise. The second time he found the details. The maintenance log, the security footage, the way she had written them not to impress him, but because she had clearly sat with them long enough that they had become something she needed to account for out loud. You don't sit with details that long if you're building a case. You sit with them that long if they're sitting with you. The third time he found the line about her father, about sitting in that room and understanding the difference between replaceable and irreplaceable. She had written it in one short sentence. The kind of short that means you knew exactly what you wanted to say and said it and didn't dress it up because dressing it up would have been a lie. The fourth time he found his name. Not Mr. Wren. Not a job title, not a category. Just Damon, like she was talking to a person. He folded the letter, put it in his jacket pocket, started his shift. The building was the same, the marble floors, the gold lobby lights, the elevator bank, the faint low vibration from the 14th floor air handler that nobody had fixed in 11 months. He moved through all of it with the same efficiency he always moved with. Steady, even. His hands knowing where to go before his mind finished the thought. But something was different, and he was honest enough with himself to name it. He was waiting. Not for her to do something. Not for a sign. Just waiting the way a system waits after it finishes running a calculation. The output is coming. It just needs one more second to resolve. He mopped the lobby floor. East windows section. He was halfway through when his phone buzzed. Mercy General. Main line. He answered. Paulette, the woman from the 4th floor desk, the one with the yellow sticky notes. Her voice had something in it that was not quite professional neutrality. Something warmer underneath, like she was delivering news she personally found satisfying. Mr. Wren, Nadia is fine. She's more than fine. She asked me to call because she said, and I'm quoting directly, she said to tell you that a very well-dressed old man just walked himself down from the 6th floor without telling his nurses, and he's sitting in her room, and she doesn't know what to do. Damon stopped mopping. She said he knocked first, Paulette continued. She said he was very polite about it. She said he asked if he could sit down, and when she said yes, he sat down and introduced himself, and now they've been talking for 40 minutes, and she doesn't know if she should call someone or just let it happen. He locked his cart, told his supervisor family situation, drove to Mercy General in 11 minutes, which was faster than usual, because he hit the light at Michigan and Wacker Green for the first time in 4 months. He walked to the 4th floor, room 412B. The door was open. Elton Voss was sitting in the vinyl chair. Not a chair near the door. The vinyl chair. The one Damon had spent 9 days in. Elton had moved it 6 inches closer to the bed. Damon knew because he knew exactly where that chair sat in that room. Elton was 68 years old and visibly not at full capacity, thinner than a man of his size should be. A hospital bracelet on his left wrist. A cane leaning against the wall that he had clearly been told to use and was using with minimal enthusiasm. He was leaning slightly forward, elbows on his knees, listening. Nadia was talking, cross-legged on the bed in her yellow robe, notebook open in her lap, hands moving, the highlighter behind her ear. She was talking the way she talked when something had genuinely caught her attention, which was all the way, no reservations, the full force of her out in the room. She saw Damon in the doorway, did not look relieved, looked exactly as Paulette's description had suggested, not alarmed, deeply, thoroughly fascinated by what was currently happening in her hospital room. Elton looked up. He looked at Damon for a moment, long, unhurried, the way a man looks at someone he has been thinking about. You must be the brother, he said. I am. She's been reading me her poems. I heard a pause. Elton looked at Nadia. Back at Damon. She's very good. I know. Nadia closed her notebook with the expression of someone choosing to be gracious about the interruption, even though her sentence hadn't quite finished. He walked down from 6 by himself, she said to Damon, without telling anyone. So I heard. Elton made a small gesture that dismissed the implicit criticism entirely. I've been in that bed for 9 days. I needed to go somewhere. He looked at Damon. I was looking for you. They said your sister was on 4. I thought it might be worth a knock. Damon came into the room, stood with his back against the wall. No chair available except the bed, which was Nadia's, or the floor. He stood, and he looked at this man, Elton Voss, who had been in that other room, on the 6th floor, in the bed with the drip running, and somewhere on a refrigerated shelf, a unit of blood that had not come from a bank, and had not been purchased, and had not been owed. They looked at each other. I'm not here to thank you, Elton said, which was not what Damon had expected. I came prepared with a thank you. Several versions. My assistant helped with the wording. He looked at his hands. But I've been sitting here 40 minutes listening to your sister, and I think I arrived with the wrong thing. Damon waited. My daughter, Elton said. Zara. You met with her? Yes, she told me. Not everything, enough. He was quiet a moment. I built that company from nothing. 37 years. And somewhere in those 37 years I taught my daughter to run a room, but forgot to teach her how to see a person. He looked up. I've been thinking about what I actually passed on to her, what she carries from me that she didn't choose. A pause. That's what I didn't come to say thank you for. I came because I needed to say that out loud to someone who was actually affected by it. The room was very quiet. Nadia had not moved, watching Elton with the complete attention she brought to everything she took seriously. The highlighter still behind her ear, the notebook closed in her lap. Damon looked at the man in the vinyl chair. the hospital bracelet, the cane he wasn't using. The expression of someone who had spent 68 years accumulating and was now doing the harder work of accounting. My sister thinks people are just complicated systems, Damon said. Elton looked at him. She thinks if you understand the inputs you can predict the outputs. Damon glanced at Nadia. I think she's mostly right. But I also think sometimes a system runs a bad early variable for a long time before anyone spots the error, and when someone finally does. He stopped. The question is whether they correct it or keep running. Elton was quiet. Your daughter, Damon said, came to a parking lot in November with a handwritten letter. No company letterhead. No assistant. Notebook paper. He looked at Elton steadily. That's not guilt. That's someone trying to correct an error. And those are different things. Elton sat with that. Looked at the ceiling. The look of a man who has been given something to think about and is thinking about it in real time rather than deferring it to later. She is better than she knows, he said quietly. She has always been better than she knows. Then tell her that, Damon said. Not me. A silence. And then Nadia said, with the timing she reserved for sentences that ended scenes, I have a poem about that. Both men looked at her. Looked back with the expression of someone who has been waiting patiently for exactly this opening and is not going to waste it, about fathers and daughters, and the things that get passed on without anyone signing the paperwork. She held up the notebook. Do you want to hear it? Elton looked at Damon. Damon looked at Elton. Yes, Elton said. So she read it. 3 minutes and 20 seconds. The three of them in a room on the 4th floor of Mercy General. The monitor ticking. The elevator arriving and departing down the hall. The city outside the window going on the way cities go on. None of it touching what was happening in this room. When she finished, no one spoke. Then Elton said, That's the best thing I've heard in 9 days. Nadia said, I know. Damon almost smiled. Almost. More than he usually did, which was already more than most people caught. At 11:40, 2 nurses arrived from the 6th floor. They had the specific professional calm of people who had been looking for their patient for some time and had passed through alarm into something more resigned. They stood in the doorway. They looked at Elton. They did not look surprised that he was here. They looked like they had stopped being surprised by him several days ago. Elton went with them without argument, which surprised Damon. But when he passed Damon in the doorway, he stopped. Put one hand briefly on Damon's arm. Not a handshake. Something older and quieter than a handshake. Use the cane, Damon said. Elton looked at the cane. I find it irritating, I know. It implies something I'm not ready to imply. It implies you want to keep walking. Elton looked at him. Then he took the cane. Walked out with the nurses and the bracelet and the slightly reduced dimensions of a man who had been very sick and was slowly finding his way back to the previous version of himself. Not the same, but moving. Damon watched him go. Turned back to Nadia. She was looking at him with the expression she got when she was about to say the thing she had been building toward. Say it, he said. That man walked down from 6 without telling anyone because he needed to say something he couldn't figure out how to say upstairs. I noticed. And you talk to him like a person. He is a person, Damon. She looked at him. You know what I mean. He did. He sat on the edge of her bed. Outside Chicago. The lake somewhere past the skyline, the sky going complicated with incoming weather. The letter, she said. Not a question. Yes, he said. She waited. The changing kind, he said. She nodded. The slow, certain nod she had been giving him since she was 8 years old. The one that meant she had known before he said it, and was glad he'd arrived. Okay, she said. Okay. She picked up her pen, then looked up one more time. Go in person. Don't call. I was going to go in person, she considered this. Nodded again. Better. And went back to her writing. He sat with her for another hour, not talking. The way they had always been present with each other. No performance. No explanation. 2 people who had grown up in the same difficult circumstances and come out the other side with different tools and the same foundation. At one he stood. She didn't look up. Go, she said. He went. He drove to Voss Capital Tower. Main entrance. He had used it 0 times in 11 months. Warren was at the security desk. Warren looked at him. Did not look surprised. Warren rarely looks surprised. 38, Warren said. Yes, Warren buzzed him through. 38 floors. The numbers rising. He was not performing calm. He was simply himself. The same person who had been in this building at 5:15 in the morning for 11 months. Same hands. Same jacket with the worn left cuff. Same understanding of exactly which systems in this building were failing and why. Same person. Different floor. The elevator opened. The receptionist started to say something preparatory. He said, "I don't have an appointment." 2 minutes. She looked at him, called in, listened, said, "Go ahead." He walked to the corner office, knocked once, opened the door. Zara was behind the desk this time, actually working. Documents spread in front of her. 2 screens. Reading glasses pushed up on her forehead the way people push glasses when they've been wearing them long enough to forget they're there. She looked up. He crossed the room, stopped at the desk, reached into his jacket pocket, set the folded letter in front of her, her handwriting on the outside where she'd folded it. She looked at it. He had written one word at the bottom of the last page, below her name. He had written it that morning at the kitchen table at 4:15, while the coffee went cold and the radiator knocked, and Nadia slept in the next room. She unfolded the letter, read down to the bottom. Yes. She looked up. He was watching her, not waiting for relief or gratitude or the performance of a woman who has gotten what she wanted, just watching the way he watched everything, looking for what was actually there. What was actually there was something he had not seen on her face before. Not in the lobby, not in the office on day 8, not in the parking lot in November cold with the notebook paper between them. Something simpler than all of it, older than all of it. The particular relief of someone who has been carrying something too long and has finally been told they can put it down. She didn't say anything right away. She looked at the letter, at the word, at him. Then quietly, without the CEO register or the boardroom efficiency or any of the professional architecture she had spent years building, "Thank you. Not for the blood. Not for the elevator. Not for the accumulated list of things she had been adding up since day 1. Just thank you. For the word. For what it cost him to write it. You're welcome," he said, and meant it completely. She set the glasses down on the desk, looked at the documents in front of her. The paperwork for the consulting role is ready. Monday, if that works. Monday works. He turned toward the door. "Mr. Wren." He turned back. She was holding the letter, not looking at it, looking at him. The line about my father, about understanding the difference between replaceable and not. A pause. "I wrote it in the car after I left. I pulled over on Michigan because I was afraid if I waited, I'd rewrite it into something more manageable and it would stop being true." He looked at her. "I just needed you to know it was true when I wrote it," she said. "Not constructed." "True, I know," he said. He left. The elevator going down. The lobby. Warren's nod at the security desk. Same as always. The nod that communicated professional regard without requiring elaboration. The service entrance. The street. November doing what November does in Chicago, which is everything, all at once, without softening any of it. He sat in his car for a moment, not starting it, looking at the side of the building. 42 floors of glass and steel. The lobby lights visible from here, that particular gold. He thought about the bearing on 14. He would write it up Monday. As an engineer, with the full technical specification and the failure timeline and the cost differential between proactive and reactive repair. And on Monday someone was going to read it. He started the car, drove to Mercy General, went up to 4, sat with Nadia until dinner. She told him the poem Elton had liked best, and he said that was a good one, and she said she knew. And they ate the food the hospital brought, and it was not good but it was warm. He drove home, pulled out the couch, set the alarm for 3:47, lay in the dark with the radiator knocking. He was already asleep before he realized he had stopped running the list. On day 21, a Monday, the lobby of Voss Capital Tower looked different. Same marble floors, same 42 floors of glass above, same light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. But the furniture had been moved. Long tables in rows, a small stage near the elevator bank, specifically near the elevator bank. The same spot where a cart had sat 3 feet left of center on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks ago. Same spot, on purpose. She had told him that when she called Saturday. She said, I want to do it where I got it wrong. Not somewhere neutral, not a conference room. There. He had said okay. She had said Nadia is invited if she's well enough. Nadia had been well enough. Nadia had in fact been extremely well enough, and had spent more energy on deciding what to wear than her medical team would have recommended, ultimately arriving in a deep blue wrap dress with her notebook in her bag, and the highlighter behind her ear, because some things are constants. They arrived at 9:15. The lobby already half full. Not because attendance was mandatory. The notice had said voluntary. The room was half full because people had decided to show up. There is a difference, and everyone in the room knew it. Warren at his desk. He nodded at Damon. Damon nodded back. Some things don't need to change. They found seats near the front. Nadia sat. Looked around with the cataloging expression she brought to new environments. It's bigger than I thought, she said. It's just a lobby. You always say that about places. It's always true. She pulled out her notebook. New location. She was going to write about this. He knew it before she opened the cover. At 9:30, Elton Voss arrived. Wheelchair, which he was tolerating rather than accepting, judging by his posture and the way his hands rested on the wheels as though reconsidering. His cardiologist walked beside him, a negotiated compromise between his desire to be present and the medical team's preference for horizontal. He was brought to the front row. He looked at Damon when they wheeled him into position, gave him a single nod, the kind that communicates acknowledgement without requiring language. Damon nodded back. Nadia leaned toward him. Is that him? Yes. She looked at Elton for a moment. He looks exactly like I expected. How did you expect him to look? Like someone who built something very large and is only now learning what it cost. She was already writing. At 9:40, Zara walked out. Not from the executive elevator. From the corridor beside the security desk. The same entrance she would have used any morning coming in for a regular day. No announcement. No introduction. She walked out and stood at the small podium near the elevator bank, and the room settled the way rooms settle when the person they've been waiting for arrives and they know it. She was in a deep black dress. Straight, clean lines. Silk-pressed hair falling to her collarbone. Heels that hit the marble with their precise sound. She looked out at the room. No notes. She had told her assistant she wasn't using notes. Her assistant had expressed professional concern. She had said she'd be fine. She looked at the faces. The people who had been in this lobby 3 weeks ago, and found something interesting in the floor, while a man in a maintenance uniform was spoken to, as though his presence were an interruption. She did not name that. She didn't need to. 21 days ago, she said, I walked into this lobby and I saw a cleaning cart near the executive elevator. And I looked at the cart and I decided I already knew everything I needed to know about the person who parked it there. The lobby was quiet. Not the manufactured kind. The real kind. The kind that comes when a room understands that what is being said is not prepared for the room's benefit. I didn't see a systems engineer with 8 years of experience. I didn't see a man who had been logging a failing elevator mechanism for 43 days because the repair wasn't being done. I didn't see someone who 40 minutes later would open that same elevator with his own hands, and the knowledge no one had thought to ask him for. She paused. I saw a uniform and a cart in my path, and I kept moving. She looked at Damon. 3rd row, gray jacket. The worn left cuff he kept meaning to replace. He looked back at her the way he looked at everything. Steady, without performance of any kind. I'm standing in this specific spot, she said, because it matters where you go back to. You don't find a neutral room. You return to the place, and you say it there. She looked at the room. I made a public error in a public space, in front of 22 of you, none of whom said anything, which I understand, because I held the authority in this room, and authority makes silence easy. She stopped. Let it sit. He didn't argue. He moved the cart. He said I apologize and went back to work. And in the 9 days that followed, he opened a jammed elevator, gave blood twice in one night for 2 patients he had never met, one of whom was my father, and came back to this building the next morning at 5:15 and did his job. Her voice was level, but it was carrying more than it looked like. I didn't know any of that. And that is the point. She looked at the room. I want to tell you something about Pierce Aldridge. A shift in the air. People who had been waiting for that name. Pierce submitted a staffing reduction proposal while my father was in critical care. The proposal included the termination of Damon Wren. I found it. I removed the name. And when I reviewed the full record of what Pierce had been doing in those days, I removed him as well. Effective last week. That has been handled and it will not be revisited. Direct. Clean. The room needed to know it had been handled, now it did. What I'm announcing today is the Wren Initiative. She said it without softening it or explaining the name before she used it. Just said it. Let it stand. Named after Damon Wren. Not after a bird. After a man who showed up to this building every morning with more integrity than anyone on this floor could have demanded of him. She laid it out clearly. Full health coverage for all employees and dependents. Effective the 1st of next month. Caregiver leave for employees managing family medical situations. Mandatory response timelines on maintenance and safety logs, with direct reporting to the operations director, rather than through supervisors who could delay or discard. A structural compensation review across every role in the company. Because I have been operating, she said, as though I understood what this building contains. I did not. I am beginning to. She stepped back from the podium. She looked at Damon. He stood. Nadia grabbed his sleeve. He looked down. She was holding out the highlighter. For luck, she said. I don't need a highlighter. Take it anyway. He took it, looked at it for 1 second, put it in his pocket. He walked to the podium. He stood there, looked at the room, at the faces, at people who had worked in this building for varying amounts of time, and who had, in varying degrees, been invisible to each other in the ways that buildings make easy and comfortable and normal. He had not prepared a speech. He had known he would be asked to say something, and had deliberately not prepared one. Because prepared speeches are for situations where you're performing, and this was not a performance. I've been in this building for 11 months, he said. In that time I've identified a failing bearing on the 14th floor air handler, an expansion joint on the east window wall that will crack before spring if it isn't addressed, a door clutch on elevator B that was logged as failing 43 days before it actually failed. He stopped. Nobody asked me about any of those things. I logged them. I reported them. Nothing happened. He looked at the room. I'm not telling you this to make a point about myself. I'm telling you because every person in this room knows something about this company that nobody has asked them yet. And that knowledge is either the most valuable thing you have, or it's just weight you carry for no reason. The difference is whether anyone is listening. He looked at Zara, then back at the room. Listen to your people, he said. That's all of it. The rest is details. He stepped back. The applause came from the middle first. Not the manufactured kind that starts at the front when the important people begin and spreads backward. The kind that starts where someone can't help it, and other people realize they can't help it either. It moved through the room like warmth moves through a building when someone finally fixes the heater. Nadia was on her feet. Of course she was. Clapping with her notebook under one arm. The expression of someone who has been told her whole life that the world is worth paying attention to and keeps being proven right. He looked at her. She gave him the nod. The one she had been giving him since she was 8 years old in the passenger seat of their mother's Civic, drawing horses in the window fog while the heater was broken, and both of them wore their coats inside the car. The nod that said exactly right. He nodded back. The lobby slowly moving. People coming forward. Conversations, starting that would have been different conversations 3 weeks ago. Some of them stopping to speak with Damon. Some of them stopping to speak with Zara. The room doing what rooms do after something real has been said in them, which is rearrange itself around the new information and begin again. Warren came from behind his desk. He walked across the lobby, stopped in front of Damon, extended his hand. Damon shook it. Warren said, "The bearing on 14. Sent the work order this morning." Damon looked at him. "You logged it 11 months ago," Warren said. "Should have been done then." He went back to his desk, sat down, resumed doing what Warren always did, which was knowing everything that happened in this building and making sure nothing happens that shouldn't. Damon stood for a moment with that. 11 months. One work order. That was the gap. That was the whole thing. The bearing, the clutch, the expansion joint, all of it. Not malice, not conspiracy, Just the particular silence that settles over the things that nobody asks about. He put that down somewhere in him and moved forward. Elton was still in the front row, his cardiologist standing 3 feet back with the professional patience of someone who has stopped fighting and started accompanying. Elton was watching the room the way he had watched rooms for 68 years, the specific attention of a builder who cannot stop reading a structure, even when he's supposed to be resting. Damon walked over. Elton looked up. No preamble. Monday, Elton said. You start Monday? Yes. First project. I'd like a full mechanical assessment of the building. Every floor. Written report. The kind you would have written at Kellerman. Damon looked at him. That's Zara's call. It will be, Elton said. I'm telling you because I'm going to suggest it to her tonight, and I want you to know it's coming. He looked at the room. 37 years I ran that company. I knew the numbers on every floor. I did not know what was in the walls. A pause. I'd like to know what's in the wall. Damon looked at him for a moment. I'll write the assessment, he said. Elton nodded once. Then he looked across the lobby to where Nadia was standing with 2 employees who had clearly asked about her notebook, and were now receiving a full accounting of its contents, including, by the look of it, a reading of at least 1 poem. He watched her for a moment. Something in his face that had been calcified for a long time was loosening. Not sentiment. Something more durable than sentiment. He looked back at Damon. Your sister, he said, the poems. She knows they're good. She should know someone else knows it. He said it plainly. No performance. I have a contact at Meridian Press. If she's interested in a referral. Not a favor. A referral. Damon looked at him. Because the work is good, Elton said. That's the only reason. Damon thought about Nadia at 8 years old reading everything. Cereal boxes. Library, books. The back of their mother's hospital discharge paperwork, because it was there and she was curious and information interested her. 22 years old and writing in a hospital bed about buildings that hold what they contain without knowing they're holding it. I'll tell her, he said. Tell her? It's a referral, Elton said. She'll understand the difference. Zara appeared at Elton's shoulder. She had been moving through the room, speaking with people, and now she came and stood beside her father and put her hand on his shoulder the way she had in the hospital. He covered her hand with his, briefly, the gesture of a man relearning a vocabulary he should have been using for years. She looked at Damon. Not the CEO look, not the lobby look, not the parking lot in November with the notebook paper, just Zara, 34 years old and standing in the lobby of her company, in the exact spot where she had gotten something very wrong and had decided 3 weeks later to come back to the spot and say so. Monday, she said. Monday, he said. She nodded. He nodded. Elton looked between them with the expression of a man watching something that is not his to interfere with. For once in 68 years choosing not to interfere, Nadia appeared at Damon's side, notebook under her arm, highlighter behind her ear. She looked at Zara, looked at Elton, looked at Damon. The comprehensive satisfaction of someone who has been predicting this outcome for some time and is not going to say I told you so because she doesn't need to. We should go, she said. I want soup that isn't from a machine. 9 days is enough. Elton, without missing a beat, there's a place on Walker. Nadia looked at him. Are you allowed out? I'm coming out. She looked at his cardiologist. The cardiologist looked at the ceiling, with the specific expression of a medical professional who has lost this particular battle and is choosing to lose it with dignity. So they went. Out through the main entrance, Michigan Avenue. The 4 of them. Plus the cardiologist navigating Elton's chair through the lobby door with the competence of someone who has been a human being longer than she has been a doctor. November. Cold and direct. The kind of weather that makes no concessions to anyone's preference for a more comfortable version of itself. The wind off the lake coming in from the east, hitting all of them the same way. No hierarchy, no altitude, just cold. The lake itself was visible from the street. Gray-blue. Enormous. Going on the way it always went on. Nadia took a breath of outside air for the first time in 9 days. Closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then opened them. Looked at the street, at the buildings, at the sky doing something complicated and serious in the distance. She took Damon's arm. Not because she needed steadying, because she wanted to. He let her. They walked like that. The way they had walked since she was small, since the Civic and the horses in the window fog, and every difficult morning that came after. Zara walked on his other side. Not close, not arranged. Just there. The way people walk together when they are not yet sure what they are to each other, but have decided to find out. The city went on around them. Indifferent and enormous, and full of the ordinary extraordinary weight of people doing their lives in close proximity without knowing each other's stories. The L somewhere to the north. Lights coming on in office windows. A bus going past. A man on the corner selling coffee from a cart that was not positioned in anyone's way. Damon walked. He thought about the bearing on 14. The work order Warren had sent. He thought about the assessment he would write on Monday, floor by floor, the kind of report that told the truth about what a building was actually made of, rather than what it looked like from the lobby. He thought about a letter folded in his jacket pocket. One word at the bottom of someone else's handwriting. The word it had taken him 4 readings and 9 days and one old man in a vinyl chair to arrive at. He thought about his mother at the edge of his bed in the dark, her voice low and level. The thing she had said and tested and found to be true. You don't get to choose what people do to you. You only get to choose who you are when it happens. He had chosen. Every time. Not because it was easy. Not because he felt like it. Not because anyone was watching or would know. Just because the choice was there, and he was the one standing in front of it, and he had never once seen a good reason to become less than what he was because of what someone else had decided he was worth. Nadia's hand on his arm. Warm through the jacket. He looked at her sideways. She was looking at the street ahead, walking with the careful energy of someone who is getting stronger and knows it, and is not going to waste the knowledge. The notebook under her arm. The highlighter behind her ear. 22 years old and already knowing something that most people need 50 years and several serious reckonings to learn. That attention is not a small thing. That seeing someone, actually seeing them, before you know their title or their output or their value to your quarterly numbers, is not a courtesy. It is the whole thing. It is the entire practice. Everything else is details. He did not say any of this. He did not need to. Nadia already knew it. She had probably known it since she was 8 years old, reading the backs of cereal boxes because information interested her, and people were the most interesting information there was. She looked up at him, caught him looking. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "You have the face." "I don't have a face." "The thinking face. The one you get when you've figured something out and you're not going to tell me what it is." "I wasn't thinking anything." "You were thinking something." She looked back at the street. "You can tell me later." "There's nothing to tell." "Then you can tell me nothing later." She tightened her hand on his arm. "I'll make coffee. The good kind." He looked at her. "The kind you actually drink," she said. "Not the kind you make and forget about." He looked ahead. The street. The city. The lake somewhere at the edge of it all. Enormous and permanent and entirely unimpressed with anything any of them had managed to do or failed to do in its vicinity. "Okay," he said. They walked. The 5 of them. This arrangement of people that no org chart would have predicted and no system would have produced. Moving through the ordinary November morning of a city that did not know their names and would not remember this day and would go on exactly as it had always gone on, which was the whole point. The city doesn't remember. The people do. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked. The light changed at the corner. They crossed together. Nadia still holding his arm, the notebook still under hers. Somewhere behind them, Elton in his chair, saying something to Zara that made her laugh, and the laugh was the unguarded kind, the kind that arrives before you've had time to arrange your face, and it moved out into the street and disappeared into the sound of Chicago going on. Damon felt it, the warmth of it. Small and real and not requiring anything of him except that he notice it. He noticed it. And he walked forward with his sister's hand in the crook of his arm, and the city around him doing what cities do, and somewhere above them 42 floors of glass and marble, and failing bearings and expansion joints waiting to crack, and everything else that a building contains that nobody asks about until someone does. He was going to ask about all of it. On Monday.